Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee. Welcome to our online worship service. I'm Reverend Jennifer Nordstrom, and I'm honored to serve as the First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee's senior minister. We welcome people of all genders, sexualities, ages, races, ethnicities, histories, and bodies. We welcome your mind, your heart, and your spirit. We welcome all you're bringing with you today and all your heart longs to set down. I'd like to welcome you in to this worship service by inviting you to repeat our first church mission after me. We gather to nurture the spirit, engage the mind, and inspire action. Our opening words this morning are adapted from the poem "Sometimes It Takes a Little Wildness" by the Reverend Angela Herrera. When you arrive at the store and can't remember why, and you forgot the vet appointment and almost missed the dentist, even though they called you yesterday, and the bills are late, and your kids need homework help, and you're behind at work, and you haven't exercised in weeks, and you've been eating fast food while vegetables wilt in the fridge, and your garden is turning to compost, and the one time you try to cook, you leave the granola in the toaster oven, setting the darn thing on fire, and you double book yourself again, and laundry forms mountains around your home, and you begin to look askance at your beloved because you haven't had fun together since you can't remember when. And then, just when you're starting to wonder about the state of your mind, you find yourself placing a metal spoon in the microwave and turning it on. Just breathe. Sometimes it takes a little wildness to get your attention. The prophet Elijah fled from 100 pursuers. He hunkered down in a cave on the wind-whipped mountainside, trembled through an earthquake, and shielded his face from a wildfire. He looked for God in all that chaos. But when the storms blew over, when the shaking stilled and the flames died down, he crouched, panting, his heart pounding in his ears, and thought he'd missed it. Then he noticed the still, small voice. The holy waits in your world too. Maybe today it will find you in a listening posture and it will whisper to you. You tumble like a leaf, it will say, and yet by some miracle, you're still here. Now, what is the purpose of that? Let's go to our beloved sanctuary now to light the chalice, the symbol of Unitarian Universalism.
I am the Reverend Kimberly Tomchek Carlson, and it is my honor to serve as the Minister of Religious Education at the First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee. The story I have for you today is called Owl Moon by Jane Yolen. It was late one winter night, long past my bedtime, when Pa and I went owling. There was no wind. The trees stood as giant statues. The moon was so bright and the sky seemed to shine. Somewhere behind us, a train whistle blew, long and low like a sad, sad song. I could hear it through the woolen cap, that Pa had pulled over my ears. A farm dog answered the train, and then a second dog joined in, and they sang out Trains and Dogs for a really long time. And when their voices faded away, it was as quiet as a dream. We walked on toward the wood, Pa and I. Our feet crunched over the crispy snow, and little gray footprints followed us. Pa made long shadows, but mine were short and round. I had to run after him every now and then just to keep up, and my short, round shadow bumped after me. But I never called out. If you go owling, you have to be quiet. That's what Pa always says. I had been waiting to go owling with Pa for a long, long time. When we reached the line of pine trees against the black and pointy sky, Pa held up his hand. I stopped right where I was and waited. He looked up, as if searching the stars, as if reading a map up there. The moon made his face into a silver mask, and then he called, "Hoo, hoo, hoo, hoo," the sound of a great horned owl. "Hoo, hoo, 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 hoo." Again he called out, and then again, and after each call he was silent, and for a moment we both listened. But there was no answer. Pa shrugged, I shrugged. I was not disappointed. My brothers all said that sometimes there's an owl and sometimes there isn't. We walked on. I could feel the cold, as if someone's icy hand was palmed down on my back, and my nose and the tops of my cheeks felt hot and cold at the same time. But I never said a word. If you go owling, you have to be quiet. You have to make your own heat. We went into the woods. The shadows were the blackest things I had ever seen. They stained the white snow. My mouth felt furry, and the scarf over it was wet and warm. I didn't ask what kind of things hide behind black trees in the middle of the night. When you go owling, you have to be brave. Then we came to a clearing in the dark woods. The moon was high above us, and it seemed to fit exactly over the center of the clearing, and the snow below it was whiter than the milk in a cereal bowl. I sighed, and Pa held up his hand at the sound. I put my mittens over the scarf over my mouth, and I listened hard. And then Pa called, "Hoo, hoo, 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 hoo." I listened and I looked so hard my ears hurt and my eyes got cloudy with the cold. And Pa raised his face to call out again, but before he could open his mouth, an echo came threading its way through the trees. "Hoo, hoo, hoo, hoo." Pa almost smiled. Then he called back, "Hoo, hoo, hoo, hoo," just as if he and the owl were talking about supper, or the woods, or the moon, or the cold. I took my mitten off the scarf, off my mouth, and I almost smiled too. The owl's call came closer from high in the trees on the edge of the meadow. Nothing in the meadow moved. All of a sudden, an owl shadow, part of the big tree shadow, lifted off and flew right over us. We watched silently with heat in our mouths, the heat of all the words we had not spoken. The shadow hooted again. Pa turned on the big flashlight and caught the owl just as it was landing on a branch. For 1 minute, 3 minutes, maybe even 100 minutes, we stared at one another. Then the owl pumped its great wings and lifted off the branch like a shadow without a sound. It flew back into the forest. "Time to go home," Pa said to me. I knew then I could talk. I could even laugh out loud, but I was a shadow as we walked home. When you go owling, you don't need words or warm or anything but hope. That's what Pa says. The kind of hope that flies on silent wings under a shining owl moon. The end.
Thank you, Kimberly, for that beautiful story. We enter now a time of meditation, which will be followed by silence, followed by spirit of life. So just take a couple of seconds now and get comfortable in your body, whatever that means to you. Maybe it means moving your head around and shaking out your shoulders, or maybe it means feeling your sit bones pressing into the seat beneath you, or maybe it means your feet resting on the floor and grounding you there. Maybe it means feeling the top of your head pull up and connect you to all that is. And maybe it means feeling your breath move in and out of your body, bringing you into here and now. Spirit of life and love, Holy One of our being and our becoming, that which is sacred within, among, and beyond us. Help us find stillness. Bring our attention to the present moment, to the sights and sounds, to the smells and taste and touch of right now. Help us bring our attention to the body, to its movement and breath, its pains and its pleasures. Help us be present in our lives, experiencing the world of now through the senses and the body, noticing thoughts and feelings as they arise and drift away again. Stillness is right here, right now, within and among all that is. May we experience it. May it be so.
Good morning. My name is Dale Skaggs, and I am happy to serve as worship associate this morning. My childhood was noisy. I grew up part of a large family in a small farmhouse. There were lots of boys in the family. They were smart, energetic, and argumentative farm boys. So it's no surprise that the old farmhouse was seldom a quietly calm place, fostering a deep inner stillness. It seemed my brothers loved rowdy pursuits, wrestling matches, pitched battles with snowballs. Fireworks were always a big hit. I sometimes played those games, of course, but perhaps more than the others, I needed silence. I needed it quiet so I could hear the world. I couldn't put words to that need, but in time I began to feel out of place, like I didn't belong. Something in me felt homeless. The turmoil around me generated turmoil within, and any sense of inner stillness was increasingly rare, usually found only in solitude. Then one summer night, when I was perhaps 8 or 9 years old, I had an experience which at the time I didn't have language to describe, but somehow I knew even then that I would never forget it. It had been a long day of work on the farm, but evening chores were finished, all the animals were settled, and some of the family were settled under the elm trees in the front lawn, quiet for once. It had been quite hot and humid earlier, but now the air felt so perfectly matched to my body, it was like a second skin. And the air was calm, perfectly still. Straight overhead, the stars were brilliant in a deep sky, and off in the distance, a huge thunderstorm rumbled across the countryside. That storm was 30 miles away, but it must have been 40,000 feet high. So when lightning showed its outlines, it looked like a distant mountain. I sat there watching those stars and that moving storm mountain with no sensation of the air around me, and I fell out of time into a brief eternity of stillness. I felt a perfect inner stillness, which had no separation from a stillness underlying all that is. I was totally at home, not separate from, not outside of, but embedded in the violent storm and the deep, calm sky and the air like a second skin. At home in a stillness beneath all that is, in an infinite unity. It was wonderful and overwhelming, awesome and fascinating and a little frightening. I still don't feel like I really have the language to accurately describe it, and it's seldom easy for me to reconnect to that experience of the numinous. So a few years ago, I wrote this poem to remind myself that it is possible. It's called I Want to Be Still. I want to be still in this world until this world forgets I am here. I want the world to go on with its worldly business while I, in my worldly body, spy on the movements of mountains, the turning of stars. I want to speak gently always. I want to say, do not hide yourself in hurry, holding your secrets close. No, it is a hungry gaze that is drawn to motion. I want to say, breathe slow, be still in the dawnings of all your days. Let the hungry, running creatures of both day and night of this earth pass you by to be what they are. They will be your best teachers of the simple, difficult lesson of enough. I want to say, breathe slow, be still at the endings of all your days, and know it is well to be what you are, to be of this earth, and to be certain that is enough.
Please join me in singing hymn number 86, Blessed Spirit of My Life.
Ah, what a wonderful treat to hear that hymn again. Thank you so much. Stillness. When I say the word, what do you imagine? If you just close your eyes for a second and imagine it, stillness. What do you see or hear or smell? What or where do you find it? Is stillness a calm pond, not interrupted by a single drop of water rippling out? Is stillness quiet? Is it a dark, starry night out in the middle of nature with no one around? Or maybe you imagine stillness within, a quiet mind, whatever the body and the world are doing. When I was in seminary, I was in dogged pursuit of a spiritual state of being that I thought was centered in stillness. In one effort at that pursuit, I took a class that was what our Star King School for the Ministry called an immersive experience. It was led by our Sufi teacher, Dr. Ibrahim Farajage. The class was a 3-week trip to Turkey to learn about Sufism by immersing ourselves in the experience of a spiritual pilgrimage to the home of Sufism's founder, Mevlana Jalaluddin Rumi. Mevlana Jalaluddin Rumi, known popular as just Rumi in the West, but called Mevlana by his family and followers, was a 13th century Muslim mystic, saint, and poet who met his beloved teacher Shamsi Tabrizi in Konya, a town in Turkey. Through learning from Shams, Mevlana experienced a mystical awakening and began writing love poems to God. Every year now, on December 17th, thousands of Sufis from all over the world travel to Konya to celebrate, to worship God, and to honor their founder, Mevlana Jalaluddin Rumi. When we were there, Dr. Farajage, who is also a Sufi sheikh, led us in Sufi spiritual practice throughout the journey, in addition to teaching us the area's history, theology, art, and culture. Before we left on this journey, I had an image in my mind of making a grand spiritual pilgrimage to a place of powerful religious history and having spiritual epiphany after spiritual epiphany in stillness and sacred space. What actually happened is that when we landed in Istanbul, 10 hours ahead of the clocks where we took off from, I was so jet lagged that I felt like I had gotten hit in the head with a bat. Then, for the next days, we hustled and bustled on bus after plane after train. Smells made me nauseous. Crowds jostled me. I was exhausted, irritable, and disappointed. This was not the pilgrimage of spiritual epiphany and quiet contemplation I had imagined. In Konya, which is a much smaller city than Istanbul, where we started, it seemed like we were still constantly in a crowd. At the tombs and the temple, at the market, even at the home we were staying in, we had 4 people to a room and shared the common space with 25. Dr. Farajage taught us history, theology, and cultural competency every day, but more importantly, He led us in spiritual teachings and practice, leading us in Sufi zikr, which includes a talk, as well as singing and chanting and rhythmic movement. These are tools designed to help the human mind quiet down. In one of the talks that he gave during this spiritual teaching and practice, Dr. Farajaje discussed the desire to pursue stillness. He told us the story of a spiritual master who sat up on a mountaintop meditating all day long and would receive students periodically who journeyed there to learn. One student admired the master so much and wanted to emulate the master's behavior. The student offered to give up their regular life and move to the mountain to live with the master and there pursue spiritual enlightenment in the stillness of nature, removed from the hustle and bustle and distractions of the world below. To the student's surprise, the master was adamantly opposed to this offer and even a little disappointed. No, the master said, giving up the distractions of the world and retreating to stillness is not the key to spiritual enlightenment. Rather, it's living in the world with all of its distractions and learning to attain inner stillness that is the difficult task of this life. Do not come live with me. Learn to find stillness within yourself in your life. I have to tell you, sitting in that room, listening to Dr. Farajaje tell that story about the student wanting to climb the mountaintop to spiritual stillness, I felt called out. I had completely expected to find stillness through the magic of pilgrimage. And in that, I had given up my own agency and my own responsibility for doing the work of finding stillness within. I had wanted the trip to do that work for me. Have you ever tried to put the responsibility for your spiritual work into somebody else's hands? That could be a grove of trees that should bring you spiritual enlightenment, or it could be, I don't know, the perfect sermon, or maybe it's a celestial being that should do the work for you. In my experience, none of those options work by themselves. They all might help. I mean, if spiritual tools and guidance were not helpful, I'd be out of a job. But none of the growth can happen without the active participation of the person who wants to grow. And that work comes from within. It's kind of annoying to not be able to export the work to someone or something else, to take a trip or take a pill or take a class or have it just be done for you. But on the other hand, it's kind of empowering too. I am responsible for my own spiritual growth. That's the lesson I learned that day on the spiritual pilgrimage. I can ask for help and I can seek experiences that will help me grow, like the one that I was in, but I have to still do the work of finding stillness within. Ugh, so annoying or empowering, whatever. On that floor, sitting there in Konya, Turkey, I reoriented and I made some deliberate, hard choices that led to an incredible amount of growth during my trip. I chose to go into intentional silence for 3 days. I stopped speaking And I used that time to journey within. In the silence that I chose for myself, I wrestled with internal voices and was eventually able to come to a new kind of peace with them. Although the external journey was the catalyst for the reorientation, it was the internal journey that helped me eventually find peace and centered stillness. Finding stillness is less about finding stillness out there somewhere in some externally perfect landscape or quiet, and more about learning to cultivate stillness within so that we can fully experience those beautiful landscapes or quiet. The external elements can really help cultivate the stillness. But if the mind is busy and anxious, no sunset or mountain or gorgeous summer storm will quell it. Sometimes those external moments of beauty can cut through the internal noise and bring the mind's attention back to here and now. But the mind must be able to stay here in the present to reap the benefits of those beauties. The world right now is intense, both in its realities and in the pressures that it puts on the human mind. The pandemic is stressful, and it's brought more external stillness to some folks while creating more external busyness for some others. Some folks are at home, alone, right now, isolated, and with much less to do, much more external stillness than usual. Other folks are at home with multiple family members or housemates in a place that has suddenly become much busier and louder. Still others, nurses, doctors, healthcare workers, are busier than they've ever been, suddenly pressed to serve in dangerous, stressful, less protected than they should be workplaces. Different external circumstances present different challenges for cultivating stillness within. A quieter external environment sometimes means more internal noise. Loud and chaotic external circumstances require more effort to focus within. And stress, grief, and loss all make focus incredibly difficult. In addition to the sudden, beautiful moments like we heard about in our owling story and with our worship associate story this morning, spiritual practices help quiet the mind and cultivate stillness within. Ironically, you can help cultivate stillness through movement, through exercise, walking, running, playing sports. The mind quiets down and focuses on the task at hand, moving the body, kicking the ball, the breath moving in and out. Exercise also releases endorphins that elevate the mood and reduce anxiety and depression, making internal stillness not just more accessible, but more pleasant. Movement, running, walking, playing sports. Movement can be a spiritual practice when it's done with the intention of being fully present here and now. Stillness can also be found through art, through creativity, through writing. Pulitzer and Nobel Prize winning author Saul Bellow said, I feel that art has something to do with the achievement of stillness in the midst of chaos, a stillness that characterizes prayer and the eye of the storm. I think that art has something to do with an arrest of attention in the midst of distraction. Bello is right, but it doesn't have to be prize-winning writing or art to work. Journaling is a popular way to process excess thoughts, getting them out on the paper and letting the mind wander through its expression. In the book, Stillness is the key. Stoic philosopher Ryan Holiday tells the story of President John F. Kennedy doodling his way through the Cuban Missile Crisis. Kennedy made notes on a yellow legal pad, the kind you've seen hundreds of times. He had single words scrawled across the page and circled: missile, 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 consensus, consensus, consensus. Kennedy drew images too. He loved sailing, and his Cuban Missile Crisis doodles included pictures of sailboats he had drawn. The President of the United States, who ultimately has to choose whether to use nuclear weapons and potentially end the world in a nuclear holocaust, doodled his way through one of the closest moments we've ever come to nuclear annihilation. President Kennedy used writing, creativity to still his mind, whether it was through escaping to the calm of the sailboat or discharging the threat, missile, 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 or through refocusing on the need at hand. Consensus, consensus, consensus. Of course, you can always find stillness through the practice of being fully present in the moment, through meditation, through mindfulness, through the intentional and regular spiritual practice of being here now. Western Buddhist teacher and author Tara Branch shares this story in her article, The Sacred Pause. One evening, she says, a woman's mother came to her and told her that she had breast cancer. The woman's first protective instinct was to respond to this shocking, terrifying news by doing, by planning, by fixing. She started rapid firing questions at her mother. She started making lists and plans. What needs to happen? She asked. What are the treatment options? She asked. How soon do we get the lump removed? But then, in that moment, she was able to take a pause and notice that her mother didn't want to talk about any of these things. The woman said, as I was weighing her options, whether it was biopsy, mastectomy, etc., my mother sat on the high-top chair in my kitchen, staring blankly into a cup of coffee. I was making plans, trying to be strong for her sake and for mine, but it suddenly became clear that wasn't what she needed. She was scared, and she needed to be scared. In that moment, the woman realized she was using staying busy, making plans, as a way of avoiding her own feelings and potential total collapse. But by pausing and being present to what was happening in the moment, the woman was able to shift and respond to her mother. So she took a breath and she walked across the room and she wrapped her arms around her mother. It was an awkward sideways hug, she said, but it was a long, necessary one. And then as she was holding her mother, something happened. Slowly, her mother started rocking back and forth like a mother rocks a child, except the child was now the caretaker. Looking back at that moment, the woman called it this sweet, tiny moment of connection and love that she will never forget. And she realized she might have missed it if she hadn't been able to pause and be still for a moment, to stop the doing and the planning and be present to what was happening in the room, and then respond to that. Sometimes stillness feels impossible to find in a chaotic world, or impossible to create in a stressed and busy mind. But it's worth putting in the work to cultivate stillness within. Being able to return to an internal state of stillness can create the kind of pause that allows us to be present to our loved ones when hardships hit. It can allow us to be present to ourselves and our true thoughts and feelings. It can allow us to be present too to the external beauty that we often think of when we imagine stillness, to the waterfall or the sunset or the perfect starry night on the farm when all is quiet and the air feels like a second skin. Cultivating inner stillness can help us be present to our lives, help us be present to the world, hearing the children play, seeing the bare branches of the trees stark against the early winter sky, smelling the bread baking or the first crisp snowfall. Each moment only happens once. May we have the attention to be here for it. May it be so. Thank you all so much for your generosity. Pledges are at the core of our congregation's spiritual practice of generosity. We're also grateful for additional gifts that support our ministry. And we want to thank all the folks out there who are appreciating this online ministry and supporting it by texting 73256 with the message "Give to you," or by giving on our website. Your gifts help us continue this ministry. We also share the plate with another organization every month. In December, Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin is our Share the Plate recipient. Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin reflects the diverse needs of our communities. It currently provides affordable, quality, and confidential health care to 61,000 people each year in its 24 health centers across Wisconsin. To give to Planned Parenthood of Wisconsin, please go to plannedparenthood.org/planned-parenthood-Wisconsin. You can see all of these options on your screen right now, and they'll live on in the YouTube comments section of this video after worship is over. Thank you so much for giving, either right now or when you come back later. Your support keeps us and our community partners going. Thank you so much. In her poem Today, Mary Oliver wrote, "I'm taking the day off. Quiet as a feather, I hardly move, though really I'm traveling a terrific distance. Stillness, one of the doors into the temple." My friends, may you find stillness today. May you cultivate it within and pass through its doorway to the temple. May it be so, and amen.
We are going, heaven knows where we are going. We know within, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, yeah. Whoa, yeah, yeah.